Welcome to the Honest Tree vlog number 2. This one will be dedicated to the topic of group rides and what their role is, particularly in racing, but also in general, and how we should think of, use group rides, what they're good for, what they're not good for, and how you can best use group rides for your own goals. So this is the second vlog I've done, as I said, and my kids joke around, they ask me how many subscribers I have to my channel, and they asked me if I got to 40 subscribers, would I do a special, video to guys celebrate for like 1 million subscribers or 100,000 subscribers or whatever. So they asked if I would do that for 40 subscribers. So I guess I am. This is the celebration video, vlog, for having 40 subscribers. So that out of the way, this video is of what we call the Pop A ride. And so this is going to be going on in the background. I may comment on the video a little bit as it goes. So as I'm recording this, I have the video in front of me, so I may at times comment on it. But anyway, for the most part, the video is not going to be pertaining to the vlog is not going to be pertaining to the video, but rather to the topic of group rides and how to use them. So first off, are group rides good training for racing? And this is, I believe, a complicated question. So what I've observed over my time, and again, I'm not the most experienced cyclist, but I think this is a topic worth discussing, and I have a few things to add to it. So one thing I've noticed is that the more elite racers, and when I'm talking elite, I'm not talking professional, I'm not talking Tour de France, although this probably still applies. The more elite amateur racers in my area, the ones that are professional, Cat 1, Cat 2, do they do these group rides? Do they do the fast group rides in my area? And the answer is generally no. Now, is there one particular group ride that these guys do? They sometimes get together and do? Yes, there is. There is one group ride on Saturday and Sunday in the Dallas area that frequently attracts Cat 1, Cat 2 racers. But that's the only one. So this is one of the faster, perhaps the fastest, I'm not sure. This is one of the faster group rides on the north side of the Dallas area. And on occasion, we'll have a Cat 2 or a couple Cat 2s. We had a Cat 1 show up once or twice on this ride over the winter. So this is winter. They're doing what they want. It's not the racing season. They can quote unquote mess around or get in group rides or whatever. So this would be a nighttime ride in the winter. But generally speaking, we don't get Cat 1s and Cat 2s. Now, if you have a Cat 1 or a Cat 2 on this kind of ride, it's going to dramatically change the ride because they're going to be up front working and the ride will be fast. And that's what we experienced last winter when those guys were on the ride. But this ride generally is going to be composed of Cat 3s, Cat 4s, Cat 5s, guys that are pretty fast, pretty fit, that don't race or they used to race, and guys that are slower than that. So one thing about a group ride is that it can accommodate, generally speaking, a very wide range of fitness levels. So the guys at the front, if you're pulling or animating the group ride, you can be doing, of course, a lot more work than the guys who are just sitting in the whole time, especially in a large group where it may be easy to shelter. So the larger the group, generally speaking, the easier it is to shelter. So why aren't the more elite racers doing these group rides? Why are they working out by themselves, whether it's on the trainer or solo rides, or in very small groups? Why are they doing that rather than the group rides? And I think it's a multifaceted answer. So one of the reasons is it's really hard to get an ideal workout on a group ride. So there is no way, let's say we have 40 guys on this particular group ride. There is no way that this group ride is an ideal workout for all 40 guys. Uh, and a group ride is a particular kind of workout, even though there's different available workouts within the same ride. So the workout that you get on the very back is different than the workout you get in the middle of the ride, and the workout that you might get if you're rotating or moving around in the front. Or there's much more surging in this kind of ride. There's a lot of freewheeling in this kind of ride, which is very different than, say, sweet spot work on your own solo. So if you have limited time and you're most invested in maximizing your time to get as fit as you can, you're not going to be doing a lot of group rides. You're going to be doing what your coach tells you to do in terms of structured workouts, in terms of doing specific intervals. You're not going to be doing as many of these group rides, or it's going to be like a once a week thing. It's not going to be like, oh, all my rides are group rides. So I know plenty of guys, all their rides are group rides, and that's fine. That's what they like. We'll talk about reasons for that later. But, I found that during the winter, I did more structured training. During the early spring, I did more structured training. I did more solo riding. And I think I was actually a lot fitter in the winter and in the early spring than I am now at the end of the summer when I've done almost no structured workouts on the trainer and not that much in the way of solo rides either. And when I have ridden solo, I've not, you know, I've just been kind of getting miles and not really maximizing potentially my workouts. Um, so in that sense, you may be doing too many group rides if you're just doing group rides. You need to be thinking about other kinds of workouts uh, to to get faster, to get better, to prepare for racing. Um, Having said that, there's a lot of reasons to do a group ride to prepare for racing. So there are different kinds of group rides. This one that we're watching on the screen right now is what I would call a surging fast group ride. So it's composed of many people that race from time to time, so Cat 3s, Cat 4s, Cat 5s. Um, and so it has a different feel. It's not organized. It's not like there's an organized pace line. And it's not like there's rules of who can move up and who can't move up. And there are guys that go off the front, and that's okay. And people will chase or they won't chase, and it'll get strung out suddenly, and there'll be a surge, and all kinds of things will happen. This is the kind of thing that happens in a race. Another thing you would find on this kind of group ride is that if you are not moving up, you are moving back. And so, one person passes you, three more pass you. You stop at a light, two more, just move in front of you at the light when it's red. Pretty soon you're at the very back of the ride. So your pack position becomes more important, something to think about, and that's what also happens in a race. When I first did this particular ride, so there's a B ride and an A ride. This is the A ride, and I'd been doing the B ride, and the B ride's organized and has rules, and everyone kind of minds their P's and Q's. When I got on this ride for the first time, I'd never done a race. It scared the crap out of me. This was, I would say, late summer of 2016. I tried the A ride for the first time. The thing that scared me was I'd never ridden in such close proximity to other riders. So just, people going faster than I'd really been before in a group ride, definitely faster than I'd been before, and we're, just really close to each other. And that made me very uncomfortable. And it took like two or three times for me to get over that fear and that, we kind of build this force field around us. And when we're just starting out on group rides, that force field is quite large. Like you don't want to be within 10 feet of another wheel. You don't feel comfortable certainly being right on somebody's wheel. When bars are next, you want the guy next to you to be like at least 3 or 4 feet away, not like, oh, there's 6 inches between our bars or we're almost touching. Um, it's a very different feel. And I talked to another guy that told me his experience. He's a Cat 3 racer. Uh, Doing this ride for the first time, and he said it scared the crap out of him too. So that's the same thing you will experience on like a first time crit, is that you're going to be riding real close, real fast. And when you've done it for a while and you're around people that you trust, there's a comfort level with that it doesn't bother you. You're used to it. I do this ride now, and for the most part, it doesn't bother me. I mean, certainly not anything like it did before. Are there moments on a ride like this where I feel a little bit uncomfortable, or someone's doing something dangerous, or someone's overlapping wheels in a way that I think's not wise, particularly on a group ride where nothing's at stake? Of course that happens. But there is this idea of getting comfortable with a group, and that's something that everyone who races bikes has to do. Um, Another thing that's really critical, and you can learn from a ride like this, is how to read a ride or how to read a race. It's not a race, but how to read what's going on. So if you're just watching the wheels in front of you, you're not going to see what's going on. What's going on up the road? What is my position? What kind of wheel am I on? Am I going? Is this person in front of me going to get gapped? How should I prepare for that? Where can I move up? Should I move up on the left or the right? Um, if you get gapped in a ride like this and your fitness level's not high, you're quite aware of it because you may get dropped and you may experience getting dropped. And that's part of learning in that process. It's okay to get dropped. Um, so, learning to read this is good practice for learning to read a real race. And so you begin to know who's strong, who's not as strong, whose wheel do I trust? If someone goes off the front, is that something that's going to stick? Do I chase that? And of course, the stakes are essentially nothing on a group ride. So chasing is something sticking. Nothing sticks really on this ride generally because of all the lights and the stop signs and things like that. But learning to read what's going on around you, to be aware of the entire group. In something like this, there aren't teams per se, even though there are people and teammates that do the ride, but it's not like it's a team-based race. Uh, Reading what your teammates are doing and what's going on and what your role is and what you want to do, that's also part of reading a race in terms of that. And so, a group ride, a surging kind of race type group ride, can be a useful learning tool in that respect. Um, Now let's talk about, I mentioned getting dropped, and so here's one teammate pushing the back of his other teammate to give him a hand in a part where the ride really surges. Everyone knows the ride surges right here. That this is like a sprint point, and you've got to, you've got to put in big power in this part to stay on, and that's just also part of reading a group ride. The first time you do a group ride is always the hardest, a fast one, because you don't know where the fast points are, where they might regroup a little bit, and so forth, where the crosswinds are, things like that. So it's always easier the second time. I remember the first time I did, I think it was the B group, and I wasn't as fit, and there were some gaps, and I covered these big gaps, and I was just dying. I burned all my matches, and then we regrouped like 100 yards after that, and I'm like, oh, so I didn't have to do anything if I didn't want to there. We would have just regrouped. Of course, the second time I knew where we regrouped, and that was a different kind of ride. That was a regrouping type ride where they do have sprint points and then they regroup and stop. So very different. Um, what else? So on this issue of getting dropped, um, a lot of people may ride like they're afraid of getting dropped, and so they may hold back. And so if you're holding back, are you really getting a good group, a good fitness training experience? Well, here's the difference between training and racing. With racing, you're trying to be as efficient as you can with your energy to maximize your placement or whatever goals you have in the race. You want to be efficient. You want to sit in. You want to be aerodynamic. You want to take shelter, if at all possible, um, so that you can conserve your energy and use your energy when it is needed. You don't want to waste your energy. And that's something you can learn on a group ride is how do I conserve my energy, especially if you feel like, you can't do work at the front. How can I stay in and tuck in and maybe you're not comfortable using the bars, in the drop bars. You need to learn how to do that. And that's something I had to learn this season is how to be in the drops because I never really did it before. And I found that when I was racing, I was in the drops, I couldn't even reach my brakes. Well, guess what? You can adjust your brake lever so that you can reach your brakes. And I had to make all these little adjustments. And over this season, I have become very comfortable in the drops, but that wasn't something I was comfortable with early last spring. So that's an example of ways of sheltering. Maybe you're going to need to learn to be in the drops in the group, in the middle of the group, and you've got to learn that. Everyone else is in the drops. You need to get more aerodynamic. You need to be in the drops, so conserving your energy. However, having said that, a workout or a group ride, if you're always conserving your energy, are you really going to get a good workout? So one thing I noticed in racing, in these crits that I did, and I generally only once or twice did I really go for a real breakaway, and it was never in a successful long-term breakaway. So for the most part, when I was racing, I was very much conserving my energy and sitting in, and maybe guys are going off the front, and I go with them, but I wasn't making moves. I was mainly following moves and that kind of thing. So I was conserving my energy, and I never had anything close to like a power PR in any of the races, which is, I was surprised by that. I thought we'd have some, but it was in training that I had all my power PRs. Um, so if you're in a group ride and you're working and you're doing it such that you will never get dropped, you're conserving your energy, and maybe you save it to the very end or whatever, but uh, think about what's the best way I can expend as much energy as possible to get as much training stress and thus get more adaptation out of a group ride. So one debate that comes up is, should I do the fast group ride or the not quite as fast group ride? So in this case, it would be the B ride or the A ride. So what I found is that the fastest, most fit guys on the B ride are generally perfectly fit enough to do this A ride. But they generally choose to do the B ride for reasons that we've discussed. They don't like the surging, they don't like the chaos. They want something that's organized, that feels safer. And when I say safer, it does certainly feel safer, but there have been just as many or more wrecks on the B ride as there have been on this A ride, which is not that many. But there isn't been an appreciable difference in terms of wrecks and injuries in terms of the two different rides. And part of that is luck. Maybe part of that is the bike handling experience of the faster riders. So, anyway, uh, stronger riders are on the slower rides, and they're the ones that are going to be doing a lot of the pulling and a lot of the work at the front. So on this B ride, and I have videos of the Pop B on here, there's usually going to be a much more in the terms of pace lining and rotation, and a certain percent of the riders will participate in that pace line and do most of the work, and therefore get a greater workout than the people that are hanging on in the back. So in an A ride like this, generally speaking, it's not organized. There may be days or moments in the ride, some days more organized than others, depending on who shows up and what people want to do. But in general, there is not a super organized pace line. Now, when we have a really tough headwind, it usually does tend to get organized and a pace line does form. But in general, it's more like, chaos in terms of people surging, moving up, going back, and so forth. So it's different in that way. And so you may actually get a better workout or more kilojoules expended per hour for the entire ride on that B ride where you were in the front working, doing as much work as possible, compared to this A ride where it's hard to get to the front. It takes a lot of work and effort, and there's chaos and people moving around, and you may not spend very much time on the front. You may actually do more work on that B ride than you do the A ride. And it depends, it's different kinds of work. So there may be more freewheeling in this A ride, whereas you may have a higher percent of the time that you spend actually pedaling on the B ride, on the slower ride. So there's considerations for that. If you're if you spend all your time conserving energy in the A ride, you may actually get a better workout on the B ride, the slower ride. Now I was listening to the Velo News podcast, and one of the coaches there, I forget his name, uh, the older guy that sounds smarter. Anyway, he said that he tells his athletes that when you do a group ride, he wants you to get out there and expend as much energy as possible. Don't hold anything back. Do the ride where you can, do the most work. That means animating it, going to the front, expending energy, not holding back. And I think sometimes we don't do that because of whatever reason, like we're afraid we're going to get dropped, or uh, you know, or we want to save our energy till the end for the final sprint or something like that. So just the week before this, it's actually in this segment coming up here in just a minute. The riders are now headed south, and so I think this would actually be a little bit of a tailwind, but this is generally a slower section of the ride. Pretty soon they're going to turn left on Parker Road, and that's generally crosswinds, and that's where the weaker riders can get dropped on that part of the ride. Anyway, last week I went to the front at the end of this stretch on Parker Road, and actually over a couple of minutes and 10 seconds, I did a power PR for 2 minutes and 10 seconds. It wasn't a power PR for 2 minutes, just 2 minutes and 10 seconds on my power curve. And I came a little bit close to being dropped after that. It's hard to do a power PR and then have the ride still full on and catch back on. And make a long story short, I almost caused a wreck trying to get back on, and because I saw a gap and tried to get in back in the line, and the gap really wasn't there, and caused a slowdown in the riders behind. So I got to be careful when you're at your limit. You've got to be aware. And so that's another factor in thinking about group rides. Are they safe? We ride in groups because we like the idea, I think, a lot of us, that we can be seen in a group, and thus we're less likely to be just mowed down by a car that says, I didn't see the cyclist. On the other hand, a lot of the risk is just the other cyclists around us, and we have to be careful that we, or myself, that I'm not the risk. But anyway, I just wanted to say the example of last week is one of the moments where I did kind of put everything on the line in a group ride, maybe a little bit risked getting dropped. And what I think is I could probably do that a lot more than I do. I'm holding back too much. Whenever I look at my power profile after this group ride, it's not very impressive. It's like Strava weighted powers, like like maybe 210, maybe 220 watts, and average powers a lot less than that. It could be as low as like 160, 170, 180 in that range. And it feels a lot more tiring than that. My highest FTP earlier in the year was like just a shade below 290, and I'm sure my FTP is not that right now. Maybe my FTP right now is like 270, or who knows. But maybe I don't work hard enough in these rides. But why do I do the rides? Uh, it's so tempting to do the group ride and not do the structured workout. The structured workout is hard. It's boring. It takes a lot of mental discipline to sit there and say, I'm going to do this super hard interval that's going to suck. Uh, or I can go out and ride with my buddies and guys, and we're out, the wind going through my hair, and the weather's good. And, pretty soon the weather's going to be bad, and it's not going to be as fun to be outside. Let's make hay while the sun shines. So it's so tempting to do a group ride instead of doing some kind of structured workout or solo ride. And so um, it's hard not to do the group ride. And I think that's one thing that draws us, this social aspect. So the social aspect, I think, is important. And that's another, going back to race preparation. I've probably had more conversations about racing and everything from should I race to am I fast enough to race, or how did you like racing, or what was your approach, or how do you approach a sprint and a crit, or what's this crit like, all kinds of questions like that. And so many of these guys that are on this ride have been so kind to me and explained things to me and acted as mentors to me. Not guys on my team, actually. I'm the only person on my team that does this ride. All the guys are on other teams, and uh, they're really supportive, and they're friends, and they're cool, and they've given me so much advice about racing and um, preparation for racing. And so in the course of 1 year, I've learned so much from being on this particular group ride. You can't underestimate that. So you know if I'm still if I haven't kicked the bucket, oh, right there, I gotta point that out. Right there in the group ride, you can rewind this if you want. I almost crashed. And so I had just bridged up. I was on that wheel right there, and suddenly there was braking. Like just suddenly the guy in front of me suddenly slowed down. And it wasn't his fault. Everyone in front of him had slowed down, and somewhere at the very front, someone had caused the slowdown. So most likely somebody was at the front, and I think this is what happened. Someone was at the front, didn't realize the group was on his wheel. He dropped anchor. He suddenly stopped pedaling. I don't think he actually braked. He just stopped pedaling. And everyone else is going pretty full on. And just stopping pedaling causes a braking action. And it ricochets backwards, and I almost wrecked. It's hard to appreciate how hard I hit the brakes in that moment. It was hard. I hit this quite significant braking. And anyway, that shows you, there is sketchiness sometimes on group rides, and you have to be careful, and you have to know who you're behind and who you're riding with, and who's safe and who's not safe, and be looking for outs, be looking for ways of avoiding crashing. And that's one reason not to get too close, and not to get boxed in, and to maybe be near the front. But anyway, safety is the most important thing. Um, so, the mentorship you can get from a group ride, and the camaraderie, and what you learn about the local teams, and just learning what the scene is like. It's part of being in the scene, and if you like cycling, I think it's important to have friends that are around, and these are guys that you'll root for in races, you'll race against. You may even join their team, or they join your team later, and so that's one of the things that makes group rides so much fun. Um, so, you know, I kind of wrote a couple of notes on a piece of paper, and I'm looking at them right now. Um, let's talk about a little about the culture of rides, and I think this is important. Every ride is going to develop its own kind of culture, and I think it's really important to learn what the culture of the ride is, and to respect the culture of that ride. So, for an example, on the B ride, there is the culture that you don't attack. At least you don't attack until the final stretch of the ride. So if you're one of the stronger riders and you come in this ride and you're going off the front constantly, off the pace line, you speed up the pace line, you cause gaps, people aren't going to like you very much. And they're not going to appreciate your presence. They're not going to say, "Oh yeah, wait, it's so awesome that that fast guy's here." No, they're going to say, "Oh gosh, that guy that's really doesn't respect the ride." And you'll get emails for some rides where they say, "Okay, we're doing this ride and it's not surging, no attacks. If you want to attack, don't show up." Blah blah blah. That's trying to specify specifically what the culture of the ride is. So um, be respectful of the culture of the ride and learn what the culture of the ride is. And sometimes there will be an official leader of the ride. Sometimes there'll be unofficial leaders of the ride that kind of take control. So, for example, there might be the guy that kind of tells everyone which way the pace line is going to go depending on the wind direction. And you need to learn the culture of the ride, and what the unwritten rules are for the ride. And so I'll give you an example where there was a little bit of a dispute between me and another rider on this particular A ride. So one time on this ride, there were two abreast, well, mostly two abreast, and I decided that I wanted to go to the front or near the front. So I actually passed on the right. I think there was plenty of room to pass on the right. And as I was moving up, I announced my presence. And one of the riders got upset at me and said, why are you making this dangerous move when you don't have to? And my point was, boy, this is a ride where people can move up. And it's not a pace line. There is no pace line. The only way to get to the front is to pass people. So, and we had a little discussion. It wasn't like heated, or we weren't mad at each other. At least I wasn't mad at him. I don't think he was mad at me. But there was this discussion of what the culture of the ride is. And, he said, "Oh, this ride has a bad reputation because of things like this." And there may be some truth to that. I've heard some people say that they will not do this ride because they feel it's too dangerous. Um, but my point was, uh, I had done nothing. One of my points was I had done nothing that was against the culture and rules of the ride. In this ride, you can move up. You don't have to stick to the line and always be in the line. Now, do you need to be careful? Yes. Is safety the most important thing? Yes. But that's an example where perhaps on the B ride, I would not do that. In fact, I probably would never do that. But on the A ride here, I sometimes, and you'll see if you've watched this video, you'll see numerous people have moved up all the time, and three across and all kinds of things like that. So different rules for different rides. Um, so some of you listening to this, so I've talked a little bit about racing and race preparation and the value of rides, and do the rides that you can do the most work in, and work towards being able to animate the ride that you're on. In other words, do more work, work harder, get to the front, do some pulls, go off the front, make the ride accelerate as you can, as you become stronger. However, some of you listening to this may be at the sort of beginning of your group ride experience, and you probably need to go through a process of going from, hey, I've never ridden with anyone, or I certainly haven't ridden on someone's wheel, and going through a process of learning how to do it safely, and things like, calling out obstacles and um, maintaining appropriate spacing and communication, and going through faster and faster group rides is part of the progression, I think, of any cyclist. And so perhaps in this day, as trainers are getting more popular, as people are doing more probably solo training or Zwift or whatever, there's going to be people that are very strong but very inexperienced in terms of group rides, and that's probably going to be a problem for the people when they join the group rides and when they do races where the legs are stronger than the brain is smart in terms of rides. So there's my buddy, moving up on the right in the black kit there. Uh, this is nothing unusual, but do need to do it safely and be aware and realize that people behind you um, are potentially moving up much faster than you're traveling. So on another day on this ride, we had another sudden slowdown, and this was a case where somebody in the front slowed down a little bit, and rather than slow down directly behind the riders, they start to kind of cross wheels a little bit and move over to the right. So as they're crossing wheels, everyone's moving over, and suddenly the line of folks that are coming up from behind going faster on the right side suddenly had to brake, and that's sort of the danger of the chaos and being aware. But that's part of group rides. Progressing through the ranks can be a lot of fun in terms of group rides. And, when you get that little bit of experience, we pass people doing group rides that are like at probably fairly low speeds and fitness levels, and they're having a great time, and that's great. We wave to them and everything. And, I've been that person on the slower group rides before, and we're all in this together. We're all cyclists. And as you know, when you get to the point where you're kind of bored on your ride, you may be the fastest or most fit person on your ride, it's probably time to think about doing a different ride, and if your goals are to become more fit. And that's exciting when you do the faster ride for the first time and you do it well and you do it successfully. And, I remember my conversation, Jim, he's moved away, but he, I don't remember. He did, he actually did the Pop A, and I ran into him a couple of times when he was dropped from the Pop A. But anyway, I was doing the B ride, and I talked to him, and he basically talked me into trying the A ride. And the first time I did the A ride, felt like a big accomplishment. Um, and another example of feeling accomplished on a group ride was when I first started cycling again in 2014. And discovered Strava because I didn't have a bike computer. My old time bike computer that I still had from the aughts that had no GPS or just speed sensor and cadence, that was broken. So I was like, well, how do I keep track of my miles? So I found an app called Strava and downloaded that. And as I became familiar with Strava, I saw that there was one particular guy that had all these KOMs around my area in my neighborhood, and I was like, who's this guy? And I looked him up, and he had a pretty distinguished cycling record, not just at the amateur local level, but at the national level. And I thought, wow, this guy's pretty fast and amazing. So, progressing over, let's see, it was by the summer of 2016, late summer of 2016, I did a Saturday ride that was the fastest out of the particular local bike shop, and that was my first time to do it. And I joined the ride a little bit late from the start. In other words, I met up with them after they'd started, just maybe 2 or 3 miles after they started. And so I was on the front actually because I, went down the road before the group got to me. And there I was right next to this guy, the same guy. And of course I knew who he was because I followed the scene over the past, 3 years. And I was like, wow, I'm right next to this guy. And, um, you know, is hero worship okay? You know, even at this kind of dumb amateur cycling level, I think it's okay. I think it's part of being human. You know, sometimes there are people you respect and maybe you hold in some kind of cycling reverence. That's cool. That's fine. Even if nobody else in the world outside of cycling knows who they are. But anyway, so I'm, you know, pulling on this road. I'm like, oh boy, you know, I'm at the front with this guy. I don't really want to come off because it feels like some kind of accomplishment to be at the front with this guy. And the ride, group ride wasn't on. It's kind of a slow, steady workout. And at that point, and I was like, boy, I might be able, you know, I might get dropped for this effort and work I'm doing at the frontier. Maybe this isn't a good idea, but I kept at it for a good while anyway. So it was later on in the ride, and where the ride kind of goes all out, all in, and it's fast. And I was just completely at the limit, and we're on this very fast section, and I'm actually on this guy's wheel, the same guy. You know, not in the front, but I'm on his wheel, and it is fast, you know, 30 plus, whatever. And that was kind of a moment for me. Like, I had gone from not cycling at all in 2014, you know, before summer of 2014. I had stopped cycling in about 2007. It was never good before then, you know, pre 2007. Never put a lot of work into it. But, you know, after all these years, starting in 2014, here I am a couple years later on the wheel of the guy that I had identified on Strava as this monster cyclist. And I'm on his wheel. And we're going hard. And it felt like a moment of, like, oh, I have arrived. Or, you know, I've crossed some threshold where um, I can ride with fast people. And that feels good, at least for me. And I think it will for you if you haven't tried that. So, um, that's part of the fun thing about doing these group rides is the level of fitness and measure of fitness. Now, having said that, you know, this is kind of a stream of consciousness, so um, not really organized in terms of thinking about what to say about these group rides. But guys like me on that ride, first time on that ride, I'm probably the most dangerous person on that ride. And I don't know the route. Um, I probably have less fitness than most. I'm probably the most nervous of everyone, you know, and I'm not talking about myself specifically, but just the new person on the ride that hasn't done the ride before and is trying to move up to a new fitness level. So, as now on this ride, after having done this Pop A ride for over, I guess, over a year now, I have to watch out for those guys because those guys are the most dangerous, and sometimes they're easy to pick out. Like, they're the ones who are getting gapped on the easier parts of the ride, or you know, just their body language on the bike is poor, and I've never seen them before. That can be a warning sign. You got to be just a little more careful than the wheels that you do know and are experienced, and you learn to trust over time. Um, I guess another topic that comes to mind is, are road bikers nice? And have you had a bad experience on group rides? Um, I think it's impossible to go through this progression from not riding to being not very fit to being fit to not have a bad experience at some point or something that's discouraging or someone's a jerk to you. Uh, and I'm thinking about my own experience. I used to do this. This was back before 2007, before I quit cycling, and I used to do this Wednesday night ride near White. It started at White Rock Lake in Dallas, and then it goes south. And you know, there were some guys I think who did some racing that did that ride. Not many. Maybe some like, you know, Cap 5, Cap 4 types. It's hard to know compared to now because I don't didn't know as much back then and wasn't really in the scene or understood the scene back then. But anyway, I did this ride. You know, I'd been doing it for a while. I hung in. It was my ride. That was the thing that was the most important to me. It was my major cycling thing. And I got to the point where, you know, I could be with the guys leading the ride. You know, it wasn't really a drop ride or anything like that. So, but anyway, I was fine on this ride, and the ride was winding down, and we're going slow back through the neighborhood toward the lake. And I don't know exactly what instigated it, but the guy who was behind me, who was, one of the younger, faster, fitter guys, I think he did racing. He was actually part of the same cycling club that I was in, just laid into me and said, I've had to be on your wheel all evening, and he didn't say evening, all night, all day, whatever, and said, basically, you suck, and I've hated this whole time riding with you. That was what he communicated to me. Like, he was pissed off, and his tone was angry, and he had never said anything to me before. Didn't really even know the guy. I mean, I'd seen him, but I didn't know the guy. And I was kind of temporarily, like, in shock, and I said to him, well, if I've done anything wrong or you have suggestions for me, please let me know. He didn't respond to that, or didn't give me any suggestions, or just, you suck and I hate you, which is a little bit disconcerting for a beginning amateur. We're all amateurs. I assume anyone listening to this is an amateur. We're all amateurs, and that can feel bad. Um, and there can be moments of that happening. You're like, these people suck, especially the fast people. Um, so after this guy said this, one of the other guys on the same cycling club who raced and was really the leader of this particular group ride, the literal leader as well as I think the charismatic, quote unquote, spiritual leader of the ride. He rode next to me and he said, "Don't listen to that guy. That guy is full of crap." And he gave me some encouragement and kind of lifted my spirits in that moment. And that was important. Uh, that was really important. And he did a really nice favor for me. And, I said the same thing to him. If I'm doing anything wrong, let me know. I want to learn. I think most people want to learn. They want to get better. They don't want to be dangerous. Um, and so I think it's important, this mentoring aspect of group rides. Being mentored and being a mentor is important. Teaching people what they need to do. And if they're doing something wrong, you know, telling them what they're doing wrong and also encouraging them. So, earlier in the ride where, and I'm not trying, I hope the people, I'm not picking on anyone. I've been the person who's done bad things and not purposefully, but done dangerous things. So early in the ride where, I almost crashed, um, one of the people in front of me started really yelling and laying into someone else who I presume was responsible for the slowdown. And, that was probably tough for him to get yelled and screamed at. He'd almost wrecked us all out. And that's a big deal. We could have been injured, thousands of dollars worth of damage, whatever, damage to our bodies, broken bones. Sometimes perhaps we deserve that. You know, how to handle it. I think it might be appropriate to yell at someone. And I think the person yelling was quite emotional in the moment because, he's almost taken out over something kind of dumb. Um, I guess when I'm thinking about it, if I yelled at the guy, well, if I was the person yelled at, I'd probably feel bad, but I need to take in the lesson of what happened, what did I do wrong, and what can I do better. I probably tried to apologize to the people, that everyone, but particularly to the people I affected, and then ask for, what can I do better? What did I do wrong if I don't understand what happened? And if you're the person who did the yelling, maybe you can approach that person later and say, hey, I got a little emotional there, but now that we're clear-headed and we have a moment, let me tell you what happened there and why I was upset and what you can do better. And that's part of mentorship in cycling. And so, getting back to the question of, are road bikers mean? And there's this perhaps reputation that road bikers are mean, and the faster you get, the more meanness there is. And honestly, I don't know the answer to the question because I don't ride with the super, super fast guys. I don't ride with 20-year-old Cat 1s and people that, want to be pro bike racers or aspire to that, or, are on the national amateur scene. But I would say there has been surprisingly almost no negative experience among the road cyclists that I ride with on these group rides. where people are supportive, and I don't have any enemies that I know of on this group. I would like, oh, I hate this guy, or we have some kind of tiff going, or this is the guy that yelled at me and hates me. None of that. Haven't experienced that at all. Uh, having to search my mind for negative experiences, that was like the main one that I described. It's almost none. And so I think if you're thinking, I've had this negative experience and it probably gets worse as you go up the chain, no, I don't think that's the case. Now, do you have to earn your way so that, if you're a jerk or you're dangerous or you're inappropriate for the ride, you're probably going to get a cold shoulder. And it's because it's not safe with you, and you're not appropriate for the ride. And maybe you've bitten off more than you can chew at the moment. But I would say that the culture is very supportive now. Is this just the local group that I'm around? Are they different? I don't know, but I don't think that's the case. I think they're pretty much probably the same all around. And again, I talked about a culture of a ride. There's different cultures and different rides, and the people that are in that ride make that culture. Um, that's and you can be part of making that culture, of making it be a positive experience and helping people learn how to do it right and have a good time and meet their goals. Now, for some people, this is the race. This is the pinnacle of their cycling experience. They work out, they do all this fitness stuff, they ride on their own, they do trainer work so that they can just be on this ride and feel fast and have fun. And they don't race, they don't do anything else. This is cycling. So when I was in Houston, I guess it was about a month ago, uh, I was talking to a guy who's really nice, telling me about the ride and what to look out for. I'd never been on the ride before. And, I asked him if he raced, and he said, this is my race. And I think that's true for a lot of people. This group ride is their race. And so, you see guys on expensive race bikes with carbon wheels, and they're riding on race tires, and they don't race. This is their race. This is, they made that bike fast so that they can do this ride fast. And um, that's kind of cool. That's good. And not everyone has to race. I respect racing. I respect not racing. It's not for everybody. And everyone can contribute to making a group ride a fun and safe experience. Um, I think this gets to the overall debate of how you approach cycling. Is it for fitness? Is it for fun? Um, that's kind of a tough decision at times. Am I doing this for fitness or fun or some other goal? And I don't know. I mean, I'm not a young guy anymore, and I feel like this is a recreational thing. I like the increased fitness I've experienced, but overall, this is for fun. I wouldn't do this if it wasn't for fun. I'm doing this group ride and not sitting on the trainer because I want to have fun. And if I sacrifice some fitness as a result, well, I'm willing to live with that at this time because my goal right now is having fun. So if you're, on the screen right now, we're getting to the end of the ride. And the ride kind of slows down in this part, and we're going to go through some traffic and some lights and come up on the last stretch before we get to the final parking lot where people park. And the ride's gotten smaller at this point because guys have peeled off. They join the ride, at certain points, and they leave the ride because they're closer to home or where they parked or whatever. And, you know, this is kind of like my race practice right now. So I found myself near the back, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm just going to call, I guess I won't use real names here. So I'll call this guy Frank. I'm on Frank's wheel. His name isn't Frank. And Frank is fast. He's one of the fastest 40 plus masters guys. He's had a great season where he's gone from he hadn't raced since he was in his 20s and started racing this year. And he's gone from beginning racer to Cat 3 to probably having the points to have a mandatory upgrade to Cat 2. been very successful on the podium in numerous regional crits and road races. But anyway, I'm like, okay, let me see if I can get on his wheel, because that might be fun for this. And what is the experience of trying to be on this guy's wheel? I don't even know if he's going to take it fast or not, but I just say, okay, can I come around this guy? Now, do I suspect the answer is no? Yes, I suspect the answer is no, but see what happens. And so, sometimes this ride doesn't take the last part hard. Sometimes I'll do like a sort of hard TT kind of effort where I gradually ramp up the power and never sprint, or sometimes it's a sprint. It just depends on what the mood of people are. And of course, you want to be safe. It's a little bit of a false flat here. It's slightly uphill, like 1%. And so, for what that's worth, I know you're probably watching this. You don't care if it's a false flat. But um, this is like, sometimes this is the most fun part of the group ride, which is that final bit. How much energy do you have left, and what are you going to do with that energy? And your strategy might be to save as much energy for this moment, just like a race, like race practice. Now, so Frank, quote unquote Frank, I'm having a hard time. Just he accelerated, it's boom, and it took me a couple moments to wind up the bike to try to get on his wheel, and I'm back on his wheel. And so there's just one guy in front of us. So I know he's a little bit, he's going to challenge this. He's not going to, he wants to go a little bit fast at the end here. And so the guy in the front, kind of slows down, and Frank is looking back like, is anyone going to pass me or challenge me at this sprint? So, so I know he's going to challenge it. So here I go. I'm like, okay, let's go. And I didn't, it didn't seem any point for me to stay on his wheel while he's going, going slow, but I needed to instigate it. And of course, he blows me out of the water here. Right there at that yellow sign on the right is the final thing. And I kind of given up before I'd hit it. He's fast. And he's, for my standards, for us old guy amateur standards. So we're coming to the end of the video here in terms of the amount of time. So I hope there's been some useful nugget, something in what I've said that might give you some ideas about how to think about group rides, maybe in a different way than you have, and to approach them in a way that fits with your goals. So your goals are different probably than my goals, or different than anyone else's goals, and you can use a group ride to focus on your goals and to meet your ends. And maybe you go in and think about one goal on a particular group ride, so you're not being repetitive and just doing the group ride in the same way every time. That's another thing to think about that was suggested to me, and I think it's very wise. So if you listen this far, kudos to you. I'll hit you up on Strava and give you a kudo. But anyway, thanks for the time, and hope you enjoyed this. Um, hope you have some good riding experiences out there. Feel free to offer any comments or anything below. And so take care. Bye-bye.